Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, are Americans powerless to stop Trump's war with Iran?
Today they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly, after that he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this.
We've told you what's happening in the Middle East. Now, we're turning to where the green light is coming from, with a look inside the Washington bubble.
These were people celebrating the fact that they were going to start bombing Iran. And to the point where one of them started singing Bomb, Bomb Iran to the Beach Boys' Barbara Ann.
I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Hey, everyone. Wherever you are watching or listening to this, today is the day to subscribe to The Take on your favorite podcast app. I asked because we want more people to get their daily news podcasts from Al Jazeera, and there is no better time. Leave us a review while you're there. It helps other people discover the show. Here's today's episode.
I'm Patty Culhane. I'm a correspondent for Al Jazeera English in Washington. And if it sounds a little weird, it's because I'm currently in the Russell Rotunda on Capitol Hill, getting ready to do live shots.
Patty, welcome back to The Take. The Rotunda, for people who have not had the privilege, is gorgeous, but clearly it is an acoustical nightmare. So I am catching you there in those echoey halls. But it's important to be speaking to you today on Tuesday because you're there since days after the U.S. and Israel strikes on Iran. Members of Congress are also there. They are back at work to vote on President Donald Trump's war powers. But what is topsy-turvy about that, of course, is that based on the Constitution, I think that was a document we used to refer to, that should have happened before the Trump administration launched the U.S. into war. So what is the mood like so far?
Well, just a little bit of context I think is important for your listeners. Congress after the Vietnam was like, we can't do this in America. So they put a resolution in place that said the president can act in the immediate term if there's a clear and present danger to the United States. And of course, people were debating whether that was the case. But he can act for 60 days, get an extension for 30 more. After that, he has to have approval from Congress. So what this resolution, though, would do is basically say, okay, we're all done with Iran. You don't have the authority to do that.
The War Powers Resolution is a federal law designed to check the president's power to deploy forces to an armed conflict without getting congressional approval. Those backing the law say the administration gave no evidence of an imminent nuclear or missile threat justifying Trump's actions, a claim that's being refuted by those against it.
So what's the mood? It's what the mood has been for 13, 14 months now. The Republicans, for the most part, are in lockstep with the president. The Democrats are in lockstep against him. You have seen a few Republican defections, a couple of notable Democrats. But what we think is going to happen is that it's going to come to a vote. It's either Wednesday or Thursday. It'll likely pass by a very slim margin, but the president will veto it. They won't have the votes for the veto, to override the veto. So that's basically here. But this isn't about, I don't think any politician thinks that all of a sudden Congress is going to assert its authority under the Constitution. They get to declare war. This is about the midterms. This is about putting every member of Congress on the record to say whether or not they agree with this act. As it's already unpopular. It has the potential to get much, much more unpopular as prices rise for Americans and more importantly, more American troops are put in harm's way. But this is, again, Democrats putting it on the record, because if it goes south, and there's so many ways it could, they want all of these members on record as to whether or not they wanted this to happen.
Okay, so Patty, what it sounds like you're saying is that if this passes, it will get vetoed. And thus some people might think, well, then this is all futile. What's the point? But it matters because of U.S. midterm elections in November, right? Okay, well, Patty, I want to go outside Capitol Hill just for a moment because I want people to understand what it's like in the nation's capital right now. It definitely sounds varied from where I sit. So, for example, on Friday, just hours before the start of the bombing campaign, a podcaster overheard 4 people bragging about an imminent strike.
I kept listening, and it was apparent to me that these were people, even though I don't think I could pick them out of a lineup, who looked legit and were celebrating the fact that they were going to start bombing Iran. And to the point where one of them started singing Bomb, Bomb Iran to the Beach Boys' Barbara Ann. And I was...
What?
Yeah.
This was at a restaurant called Joe's, which is just a couple blocks away from the White House. And TMZ, of all places, publishes this. So this is breaking news via TMZ. Is that a slice of life in Washington right now? Help us understand.
Yes, it's unprecedented in any other administration. It's been a massive scandal because you don't go to Joe's Crab House and divulge when forces are going to hit another country. It's in any other administration, there would be congressional hearings, people would be identified. But nothing, I've covered Washington for a little bit now. Nothing that this administration is doing in this second term is like anything I've seen before. Let me just give you an example. The Pentagon, which I used to cover. I can't cover the Pentagon because the powers that be in the Pentagon put out this manifesto, basically, that we were going to have to sign, that we would promise not to publish any information that they didn't want us to. And the way the lawyers read it for some of the organizations was that it could lead to charges of treason. And they said, if you don't sign it, you lose your hard pass. And of course, no respectable journalist was going to sign that. So I can't, in this time of war, when the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs did a press conference, not a single independent journalist was there to ask questions. The other way is there's just so many, living in Washington right now is, and I can't overstate the economic impact of the 300,000 federal workers who lost their jobs.
Right.
Obviously, that's across the picture. But a lot of people I know, a lot of my friends, are kind of desperate. Unemployment's run out. Nobody's hiring. Washington itself, the economy feels pretty dire. There just aren't a lot of jobs. Just a story a colleague told me about, a friend of hers posted when this all started, a job at a local library to shelf books. And they got 200 applications, including people with PhDs.
Wow.
So, and Washington itself, and this is a point of contention for the president because he often talks about how D.C. restaurants are booming. They're not. The National Guard being here, a lot of people stop coming into D.C. You drive down the street and it's open retail space, failed restaurant space, block after block after block. A lot of restaurants now are struggling because Washington, D.C. immigration has been targeting Washington, D.C. for months now. And they obviously, a lot of people stopped going into the kitchen staff jobs. So Washington, D.C. right now feels like a chaotic, economically depressed place.
And the irony that I'm thinking of when you say that is that so much of it sounds, to a different degree, of course, but so much of it sounds like what caused the protests in Iran in the first place, this dire economic situation that people found themselves in. So I want to keep that in mind as we head back to the Hill, because also on the Hill this week was the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And he spoke to lawmakers behind closed doors, and he came out with a new explanation for why the U.S. decided to go to war in the first place. It was Israel. How does Israel's influence factor into what is going to happen in Congress this week? Does it?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because as soon as I saw, so Secretary of State Marco Rubio came out, and Rubio was a little bit more vague, where he was like, well, Israel was going to act, and then we knew Iran was going to hit us, and more Americans would have risk. So we had to act. And I was doing live shots on it. I was like, did we forget the part about the U.S. having quite a bit of leverage over Israel, perhaps the most leverage of any other country over Israel? But then what was striking after that is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, he came out and talked to reporters after. And I was live right here. And they played the saw, and I hadn't heard it. And so they're playing his interview. And then they come to me, and I was like, you're supposed to be like, I have no emotions. I'm a robot reporter. I was like, because he said...
Mouth agape for our listeners. Okay, Patty was mouth agape.
Yeah, well, and God, I hope this doesn't make video, because that is not an attractive look for me. He literally came out and said Israel was going to act with or without us. And if they had, the Iranians were going to target our people, so we had to get involved. Because Iran is an existential threat to Israel. And I called the Doha newsroom. I'm like, guys, this is huge, because they're just saying it. And why is this huge? We have seen, since the war, the genocide in Gaza, we have seen Democrats split from support for Israel, some very publicly, to the extent that the Washington Post had a fascinating investigation. They believe the Israeli lobby is actually getting involved in primaries in Illinois in Democratic primaries, to try and shore up the more pro-Israel Democratic candidate. I mean, we're seeing Democratic members of Congress getting challenged in their primaries because of their support for Israel. We had already seen during first strikes, the Tucker Carlson, some of the others come up say, whoa, this is not America first. And come out strongly against Israel and the U.S. doing Israel's bidding. So for them to come out and just say, this is why we're doing it, and the difference could be the 12-day war in the summer with Iran didn't have an impact on the American people. It just didn't. The Dow Industrial average fell 1,000 points at one point today. They're talking about gas prices going up quite a bit. They're talking about inflation because of the shipping interference. We're talking long-term consequences, and affordability was already the main issue. That said, that's on the periphery. Well, more importantly, soon you're going to start seeing the bodies of American soldiers come back through Dover Air Force Base. That's where they bring the military down. And I would guess they're going to try to avoid cameras going there because it makes it real, but they can't stop the families from telling their stories. And if the death toll continues, this is why the Democrats are pushing for the War Powers Act, because they will own this.
I'll have more with Patty after the break. Patty, I want to talk about what we would be talking about if not for this war.
Does it involve files?
It does.
Does it involve files by chance?
On Sunday, Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, said on X, bombing a country on the other side of the globe won't make the Epstein files go away. So, what is the status of the Epstein files in Congress right now?
Thomas Massie has become quite the unexpected thorn in the side of U.S. President Donald Trump. He's co-sponsoring this legislation. What is the status of the Epstein files? Well, the immediate takeaway is as long as you're in the United States, you're good. If you were in the files anywhere else in the world, you're facing consequences, right? So we have seen the committee investigating this turn this into a very partisan issue. They interviewed and totally blank at his name. But Epstein's first beneficiary, the guy billionaire who did Victoria's Secret, and no Republicans showed up. But then when they did the unprecedented step of deposing a former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, and everybody came. And so so here's what's gone. We have 3 million pages. And the way they released it is such a bleh. They released accidentally a form that detailed the FBI getting tips about Donald Trump raping children. And then they took it away. And then everyone's like, we have screenshots. So they put it back. And then they put out an index of these are all the documents you received. And I believe it was 4 different interviews with the FBI did with people making accusations against the sitting president. Mm-hmm. Those documents aren't there. No, they didn't take it out of the table of contents. But it's just, so the way it's been released has been, victims have been identified, and journalists are calling the Justice Department being like, they're showing this girl, we could identify this, sex trafficking victim, and they're taking weeks to take it down. And the Justice Department was like, we still have 3 million documents, but that's all you're going to get. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to point out a couple of things. The documents that they already put out are going to be very damaging to some of these people. We've seen some repercussions, that Larry Summers resigned from Harvard. We've seen top lawyers leave their firms. So outside of the government, there have been repercussions for people because these emails are, they're gross. They're just disgusting. And I'm not talking about send somebody a Hermes scarf or whatever, but one was enjoyed my Russians. It's just bleh. Mm-hmm. It's all subverbs. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine reached out, messaged me on Facebook because, bold. And she said, are there going to be any repercussions? And I said, not right now. Give it a minute. Because there are 3 million pages. The Justice Department released these in such a sloppy manner. It's going to take time. And every major news organization, God knows there's many fewer of those now, they have teas. They're using AI. They're going through it. The story, and I get on, where are the stories? Give it a minute. I do believe it's just going to take really long time.
Then I do want to ask, I'm dating myself with this question, but just very briefly, there are comparisons to the 1997 movie, I think it is, Wag the Dog, that, a sex scandal creates the team around the president who's facing re-election to drum up interest in a war. Is that at all what you see happening here?
Let me look at it this way. And this is what I've been saying in some of my recording. He has bombed 7 different countries. And he has faced no consequences. Yeah. There have been no consequences. There's been no blowback. The American people aren't paying attention. If I went up to anyone on the street, not in Washington or City, but if I went up to anyone in the street in, Chicago, my hometown, and said, did you know he bombed Nigeria? You're like, he did? It's just not, it didn't get through because, again, everything, every day, some else, but same time, the involvement in Iran has not impacted his core supporters. And I will tell you guys, I grew up with some very, very, very mega people. Mm-hmm. And I reached out because, I wanted to get their understanding. I said, are you governments? I want to know, to please help me do my job. Because, again, in D.C., there aren't a whole lot of alien congressmen. There aren't a whole lot of mega people. Right. And she sent me an Instagram post. I think it was a guy in Australia talking about that he couldn't even pronounce in hijabi or something. It was just, and it said, women in Iran are taken to the streets and taking off their medieval headgear. And he mispronounced, I wish I could remember, because I was like, to him, what? And then he said, the feminists didn't free them. Donald Trump did. Who knew Donald Trump's the world's biggest feminist?
Wow. Final question, Patty. You touched on public opinion, so I want to get your take on this because we're talking on Tuesday. Tuesday also marks the day that Iranians held funerals for the 165 schoolgirls and staff killed in one of the first big casualty attacks of this U.S. and Israeli war in Iran. Most Americans will never get a chance to see the images that I've seen, the images of these burials, just tiny little plots, so many little plots. But 6 U.S. service members have also been killed in this war so far. You touched on that fact earlier. And we may see a bit of coverage of their deaths. We may not, as you mentioned. Overall, though, we know that opinion polls show only 1 in 4 people wanted this to happen in the first place, this war in Iran. So I'm wondering, when we think of public opinion, is November far enough or close enough? Will people forget by the midterms?
Depends on what happens. It depends on how long. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know that's a wishy-washy answer, but it's the truth. It depends on what happens. And here's the thing I don't think the Trump administration took into account. You have a lot of assets in the region, which is good if you want to go on the offense. It's bad if you're worried about being on the defense, right? So what if a ship goes down? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And I will say one thing about the tiny confidence for the girls' school in Iran. No, we're not seeing, because, you know, the American media likes to show bombs and tomahawks flying off air, destroyers. What the news media shows in the U.S. hardly matters any. What matters is what's on social media.
Right.
Because nobody's watching news. Literally, nobody's watching me. They're not watching painting. They're barely watching eating. They're just in the store. And I also think it matters. And over 1 year, I would love it if your audience could go back YouTube and look at the story I did about the history of U.S.-Iran relations. Did it just a couple of days ago.
The Shah of Persia has been paying a state visit to President Truman.
It was 3 minutes and 50 seconds long because there's a lot of history. But there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. And I went up to a friend of mine who was Scottish and said, the bureau, he was like, my American education was so bad.
Yeah.
And here's what I didn't realize. We gave Iran nuclear abilities. We gave them enriched uranium. We trained their scientists. It was something called Atoms for Peace, because we figured they wouldn't want a bomb if we were like, here you go. So we did that. We supported. The CIA put the Shah in power when the Prime Minister wanted to nationalize Iranian law. So we did a coup. We trained his secret police that were, like, in the world of secret police, they were real bad. From an American perspective, because we are taught in school, journalists are taught that America is a force for good. And I think it's really important right now to have the context. If you're an Iranian and you live through the Shah, right? Do you forgive that? I don't know. So I don't know. But the U.S. can't just be like, we couldn't let Iran have the bomb. Dude, you gave them the technology. Literally. You gave them the enriched uranium. We said to your scientists, here how you keep enriching. And so, yeah, I think context matters.